rock show.
I love The Cure.
Yeah, they deserve everything they have, and long may they continue.
Their new album is just blowing me away. All love to The Cure.
They've always had such a unique and singular vision, and that hasn't been compromised or swayed.
The Cure are the reason that I'm in a band at all today.
I am so grateful to be alive in the glow of The Cure.
That's the testament of it, that your band has had such a massive influence over everything that kind of gets played on my show, from like Blink-182 to like black metal.
Yeah, I know, it's weird. I'm not just saying that. I find sometimes I kind of pinch myself because it's, we run into like people at festivals and stuff and they're like, oh, I love your band. And I'm like, really? But, yeah, it's great. You know, but like I was just saying, I listen to a lot of different kinds of music. So it's a failing when you assume that someone who plays in a band that plays a certain kind of music only listens to that kind of music, because in fact they don't. You know, no. I don't know anyone that's in a band that just listens to the music that they play. You'd be insane. Really. Yeah. You know, you have a love for playing a particular kind of music and that's what you do. But I mean, you know, in fact, it's more often the case that if you are playing a certain type of music that you don't, I mean, I don't listen generally to the kind of music that I think people would imagine that I would listen to. Okay. So using myself as an example, I'm wrong to assume that it's strange that other people who are in very, very different kinds of bands would like what we do, because I think a lot of the time when I meet people, because most of the people that you've mentioned, I've kind of, I either know reasonably well or I've bumped into, I think they appreciate what The Cure has done as a band through the years and has kind of existed and pursued its own kind of thing. It's done its own thing, It hasn't really kind of bent very much to whatever the prevailing mood of the day is and has succeeded on its own terms. I think that appeals to a certain type of person. It's not really to do with music. It's just about doing it on your own terms. And I think when push comes to shove, it's very easy to say that, and it's a real test when things start to not work out as you'd want them to be kind of seduced by other people who claim to know better than you about what you're doing. And that's a failing that, unfortunately a lot of people fall by the wayside at that point. Yeah. But I admire the people that don't, that just kind of like the dogged individuals that just kind of, and pretty much everyone that you mentioned on the list has that about them. They just they persist.
Yeah. That's the nature of somebody that's making great art, isn't it? I think that, but you're right as well. I also think that it is easy to fall into that trap of having a bit of success and then all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, you should just keep doing that. And then it becomes a different thing altogether.
It's easy to do that. It's an easy trap to fall into. Yeah. I think the key to longevity though is really, even if you do make the same music over and over again, some people like that. There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. I mean, Status Quo did right out of it. Yeah. It's,
AC/DC's done all right.
Yeah. I mean, it's comforting, not in a crass way, but I mean, it's like, what you're going to get. It's like, there's something good about that. It's like when, if you pour yourself a cold Guinness and it tastes of mustard, you're going to be really unhappy. So sometimes knowing what you're going to get is a good thing. It's like, there's nothing wrong with it at all. I think the key to longevity is really just like to be honest about what you're doing, just to do it on your own terms. I think, and that's what resonates with, not just with other artists, but with an audience. That's how you keep people interested, because they, I think if once people get a scent of the idea that what you're doing isn't really what you really want to be doing, it's over, because you can never get it back once you've lost it.
Yeah. Tell me about it. You saying about this record, kind of surprised that it was the record of the year for me. But as you said, it is such a heavy record. I mean that emotionally, but also, thematically but sonically as well. I think there's moments where it's kind of surprising in a way, because I think Simon's based on this. There's like so many moments where it's really pretty harsh. And driving, but the way it sits within everything else is so beautiful.
Something of a tension when we were mixing it between me and Corky was primarily centered around Simon's bass, because I always want to hear Simon's bass. It's changed over the years. When we first started out and we first did the band, he had a much more chorus, open, kind of cleaner sound. But his bass sound and the way he plays it and the way he is as a person has changed and developed over the years. And I think, and what I was trying to get with the bass sound of the album is actually what Simon is like. It's not just about the bass. It's about like how he plays the bass and who he is. And it's like, it's that. And it's the same with Reeves. It's like trying to get, it's not just trying to get a great guitar sound. Some of the guitar sounds, it's like, it's too, I was getting slight criticism because it's like, it's not bright enough. It's too muffled. It's kind of sitting in the mix too much, because it's being listened to more in a sort of technical way. And I'm saying, no, I'm hearing Reeves playing guitar as he plays when we're on stage and what he does when I'm singing. That's what I want on the album. So it's a more, he's playing some really fancy stuff, but it's kind of almost buried. That I like that because I think it's like you, the listener, have to kind of really engage with it to figure it out. And I think that's why, I suppose, comparing it to the production for a moment of a lot of the stuff that's on your show, it is soft, and it doesn't have that wide frequency range so much. It's much kind of mellower. Even the heavy stuff's like, but there's an emotion about it that I think is sometimes missing. That sometimes I think in lots of genres of music, the actual sound and the production takes the place of genuine emotion. And, there is, like you just said, there is a heaviness in the emotional content of the record, which makes the record feel sort of bigger than it is, I think. When you live with something for it, like I've been doing it for like through the summer and mixing it, and it's just come out and everything's kind of happening, like it's all a bit sort of overwhelming, to be honest. And so I haven't really had a chance to sort of like think about what it really is, the record. It's just because I've been kind of caught up in it. And it's, I think probably at Christmas, I'll probably find somewhere quiet, sit down and have a listen to it and see what I think.
It's really good.
Yeah. I bask in the closing like, album of the year.
Yeah.
It's not that good.
It is. It really is. I know that you said around the time that Blood Flowers came out that when you made Wish and Wild Mood Swings, that Disintegration and Pornography was like deep in your heart. And I feel like this record it's swimming in similar waters to those.
Yes, it is. And looking back, it's strange because all the albums out now, and I turned 65 this year. When we recorded the album, I just turned 60.
Yeah.
And same with Disintegration, I just turned whatever I turned, 30. I think so. Yeah, it is weird. And Pornography, it was a year after I turned 20. Well, it was actually 21. It was more of a big deal for me. That's when I went a bit crackers, I think. But so the albums do tend to reflect, and the same with Blood Flowers was like a turn of the century thing. It's like that was, I turned 40 for Blood Flowers. So I am either intentionally or not kind of marking times in my life, I suppose, with, they are of necessity, I think, because of who we are as people, that you do at those big birthday moments, when the celebration is over, you do try to kind of take stock. Yeah. And, wonder about what just happened and what's going to happen next. So, and I think a lot of that has gone into those, like what I think of as our sort of the big emotional albums that we've made are usually informed by something in my life actually like changing irrevocably. And it doesn't sound like a big deal, but turning 60 was actually quite a thing for me. Honestly, I really didn't think I'd get to 50 and I'm turning 60. And then 65 and then the album goes to number one. I'm just sort of thinking this is like some cosmic joke, to be honest. Someone's going to say none of this is actually happening. You're imagining it all.
I mean, that's essentially what a lot of the record's dealing with, isn't it? That's one of the reasons it really resonated with me as well, is the fact that it deals with those moments where we suddenly go, I'm not 25 anymore. And the reality of it becomes really very apparent. And I think having things happen in my life in recent years, I feel it's funny because when you go through your teenage years, you feel pretty invincible, don't you? You don't have the reality of actual existence.
Or it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Even if you're not really invincible, it doesn't really matter.
Exactly. And then as I've got older, that's really been driven home. And yeah, there's been moments in recent life of like losing friends and losing family members where all of a sudden it's like, the reality of it really gets driven home and things like I'm now the age that my mum and dad were when I met my wife. And things like that, you suddenly go, yeah, but I'm not the same as they were. Or is that just my perspective of things? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's very difficult because a lot of what you're saying is actually what I struggled with and why the album took so long to get made is because from a position of really like horrible privilege, I'm very loath to weep and wail But it's trying to find a way to express what are essentially universal emotions in a way that doesn't sound kind of self-pitying or like it's that I've struggled with lyrically, to try and get the right kind of tone into the songs, and also then to sing them in the right way, to acknowledge the fact that these are songs that are being sung by someone who's now a lot older than he was when he sang the last lot of songs, and things that I kind of thought I dealt with and expressed. I've actually found that when I listened back, because I was doing the remasters over the last few years, and I kind of listened to what the Cure have done, and some of it I think I understood what I was, and there are other parts of it I think I had no idea what I was doing. I really didn't get what, I think obviously we always think we know what we're doing, but unless we don't. But I look at it and think I'm not really understanding what I'm singing about. So it's a good try. But with this one, it's taken me a long time to find the right set of words and the right way to sing them in order to communicate to myself, actually, primarily. Yeah. This is sort of like how I feel about pretty much everything at the moment. But it's also a difficult balancing act to not to make a record like this that has the emotional content that it does, and trying to stay away from that feeling of like you're just like moaning, because I'm really not moaning. I really love being alive, and I think that's actually what informs the record, is that I don't want to not be alive, rather than like it's kind of the opposite of doom and gloom, thinking like we're all going to die. It's like making the most of being alive. So that's why the record isn't really as dismal as I thought it would be. It's inspirational to me that the record has touched a younger generation. It just shows that the way of dealing with these things is they're universal things that everybody feels, and it's not a question of being selfish or thinking like, or being self-pitying. It's just natural, and it's just like, as I just wanted to deal with it in a certain way before I got too old to do it. Really,
it does have that, but at the same time, it's like you said, it's not wallowing. It's just actually very real the way it's presented, and I think that's one of the things that makes it the triumph that it is. But yeah, I hope I didn't mean saying like I was being self-pity when I was saying all that stuff. No, I didn't mean it like that.
The thing is that it's human nature, like to feel. I mean, you are at the center of the universe. There's no question about it. Everyone is. But it does. If you're in a creative process, if that's all that informs what you're doing, there is a danger, and I see it all the time and hear it all the time, and people becoming obsessed by what could otherwise be a really interesting idea if they just kind of like took a step back, or kind of like saw it from in a different way, and just like made more of it. And it's that, I suppose. I just didn't want to bang out an album, particularly after waiting so long. I'm thinking like, we're not just going to put out an album because that's what we do. And as each year went by, I think there's less chance of us ever doing another album. And it was only really in 2019, funny enough, with the anniversary of the moon landing, was really, when I think about it, was what triggered me to think like, I really want to do another album, because I was overwhelmed with this sense of having lost that world that I imagine I was born into. I was 10 years old when the moon landing happened. And I really believed that this was a wonderful world that I was going to inherit. And it really, it didn't turn out quite how I imagined as a 10-year-old. And for me personally, it's way, way better than I could have ever thought. It's better than going to the moon, what I've done. Yeah. In many ways. I wouldn't trade it for going to the moon, particularly not if I had to share the spaceship with the people that are going into space, but that's another story. But I mean, for most people though, for the majority of the planet, it is a worse place to be than it was when I was 10 years old. A 10-year-old now, depending where they are, there are more places in the world where it's much, much harder to be 10 years old than it was when I was 10 years old. And it's that sense of kind of fighting back, I suppose. And it's like, I wanted to kind of like, not memorialize the world that I've lost, but like to kind of present it in a way that it's like, I still feel it's there.
I think it's interesting you saying that, like, listening back to older stuff and thinking that you didn't know what you were trying to say, but at that point you probably did, right? I feel like
I did, and
because we're not the same people.
I'd qualify that because although I was the same, I'm the same person in most respects. I was so mentally and emotionally so different And much less concerned about, again, just like basic human nature. It's, you know, that line that travels from not really caring whether you fall off a cliff when you're 15 years old. It's a long, you know, and not necessarily straight line, but it connects, you know, and there are points along that line where you suddenly think, actually, I like this and I don't want to let go of it. And people become more important to you. You actually become, you know, hopefully you grow into someone who's like slightly less self-pitying than when, you know, I mean, everyone when they're young pretty much is part of being young. You know, it's great. That's how you find out who you are. But, it's a dreadful trait to have as you grow older. People who feel like it's the first time that anything has ever happened to them. And that's the difficulty I had. It's like, you know, I'm not the first person that's lost a brother. I didn't want to trivialize it. But I didn't want to acknowledge the fact it's happened to everybody else because it's only ever happened to me once.
Yeah.
It's that balance that I was, you know, and with pretty much all the songs, that's the balance I was trying to strike with the things that really matter and that have happened to me, but also making them resonate emotionally with other people. It sounds dead easy, but it actually is not. It's been the most difficult thing that I've ever done, this album. Going back to music, I suppose the thing, like earlier, saying about like rock music as a genre, right? And that sometimes I think, if only it didn't sound so hard, which sounds sort of stupid, but going back to like I was saying about like, so my idea of rock music was like the Rolling Stones and Jimi Hendrix and Cream and, you know, that kind of band. And then moving on to like Thin Lizzy. But when I wanted heavy music, I suppose because of when I grew up, it was the Clash, and then I was doing my own kind of thing, and it's like, but now I think of like heavy music, stuff like Mogwai or Guys and Astronaut stuff. It's like, it's instrumental, it's like, you know, Godspeed You Black Emperor, it's that kind of stuff. And I was thinking back to like, the reason why I fell out of love with rock music to some degree when I was a younger man and kind of gravitated more towards punk was twofold. One was because I couldn't play well enough to be in a rock band, but also I wanted the words to mean more to me than they did. And the words that spoke to me were in other genres of music, and that became more important to me than the actual music. It was like the communication of those ideas. So Bowie playing like a rock song, I engaged more with it because I loved David Bowie. It became more important to me than the genre of, you know, of rock. And then I discovered my own music, and I think that's the crucial part of anyone's musical upbringing. You suddenly find your own, you know, your generation's music. For me, that was punk, and it's like, but I think that there's a certain, what I was saying earlier about the comfort of knowing what rock music as a genre doesn't depend on technology. That's what's really good about it. And that's why, you know, people say, oh, it's the end of guitar music. It's like every couple of years someone says it's the end of guitar music.
Yeah.
You know, it really isn't ever going to be the end of guitar music because it's like when everyone else is this, you know, someone's going to be sitting there playing a guitar. It's like, it's so obvious. It's more about people than technology.
Yeah. I think novelty plays a part of it as well, though, because like when a lot of the bands that you mentioned earlier first came out, that never existed before. So like, Black Sabbath putting out their first record, everyone's like, what is this?
Yeah.
It's like,
I was one of them.
Shocking because it didn't exist. And same thing with punk. And I think that every other genre that's come after that, there is that. But now we're almost at this point now where it's like,
what do you think the last new genre was then? I can't think.
I don't know, because I feel like the tribalism that always existed when you were growing up, when I was growing up, it's like, I feel like that's gone, where it was even to the point where if you liked punk, you couldn't listen to metal, you know, because
unless it was Motorhead.
Yeah, exactly. There were the points that were the crossover, the Venn diagram. But yeah, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like now that's really gone. And there's a whole generation of kids now. Like I see it with my daughter. It's funny because I'll as she's grown up at various stages in her life, I'll like walk past her bedroom or whatever where she's doing homework, listening to music, and she'll be listening to Nick Drake. And I'll go in and I'll be like, oh, you like Nick Drake? And she's like, you don't own music. And I think that's amazing. And then she'll listen to you, or she'll listen to, I don't know, everything. And it's so broad, whereas before it felt a bit like, oh no, this is your thing, so you just kind of stick with that.
The flip side of that, though, is that, I mean, having lived through, I mean, I was involved in quite a public spat with a band about the value, which essentially was, for me, was about the value of music. And it's like, and they want people to pay what they thought that the music was worth. And to me, and I had this argument, I've had this argument over the years with a number of people. And I feel that, like, as the person that's creating it, that you unless you yourself value it to some degree, I have no idea why you're doing it.
Yeah.
You know, so to me, it's like, it was rubbish, that whole concept, and actually undermined the idea, and in its own way, helped to carry through this idea that music was just like, it was kind of almost a disposable commodity rather than being something which was really important. So going way, way back, you'd save up to buy an album and you'd listen to it to death, because that's all.
Even if you hated it.
Yeah. You'd come, I mean, I've got vinyl albums in my collection, like, I mean, am I going to say who? I mean, some prog rock stuff, you know, like, I mean, the Yes albums, and I listened to it so much that eventually I knew it, and I thought it's quite good. I mean, is it? I could still sing it, but yeah, music meant so much because you invested so much in it. I'm sure that still goes on, but it's not the norm, because music has become, it's all pervasive. So that's the flip side of what you're saying. It's not really it doesn't feel like as important as it used to. I don't know whether it's a good thing or maybe it's just I mean, obviously that's my perspective, but I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Because it's omnipresent. You can go shopping and everything's, you're just drowned in it.
They never had music anyway, you know.
Of course.
I can remember when lift music started and actually being quite interested. We used to go up and down it. When we were in a hotel, we literally used to go up and down the lift to listen to the piece of music to the end of it out of respect for the person who'd made it. And then realised it was on loop, you know.
Yeah. Drone No Drone, I've played on the show a couple of times, and it's kind of right in the middle, so maybe we should talk about that. There's a couple of things that really stood out to me, aside from, like we were saying about the bass in that one is a great example about how it's kind of so harsh sounding, but also it's got loads of bounce to it, but it's still a really heavy song.
Technically, it's got bounce because Simon won't play a 5-string bass, so it's detuned to C.
I'm kind of with him
on
on
a regular bass. Like, so the bounce is there because the string's moving about 4 inches every time he hits it, and the tuning's like, it took so many takes to get, like, because the string's so slack, the slightest movement, I was like, no, you're out of tune again. Oh, I'm not. And I was like, yes, you are. How can you tell I'm out of tune on a low C? It's like, yeah.
Well, there's a couple of things that about the lyric about the case of me misplacing my identity.
Yeah, the two songs on the album, I think that are probably less emotional or less about me as I am now, All I Ever Am, and Drone No Drone, because it's kind of looking back at myself, so it's in a very disparaging way. Fragile Things is sort of like that as well. I'm kind of having a bit of a go at myself for what I think, you know, who I think I am and what I think I'm doing. And Drone No Drone was partly inspired by when I was saying about that a drone went over the boat when I was outside, and I did feel really aggrieved, as I thought, like, you know, why do you think you're able to do this? Like, you know, to hover over, like, and it's just sparked this thing in me, and then I thought, you know, how dare you, like, my privacy, blah, and it led me down this weird sort of path, like, which was more about my reaction to it. Than actually, like, about the drone itself. And it's like, and I was thinking to myself, why did I get so upset about it? Because nothing really happened, you know, and I'm watched for a living kind of thing. It's like, so what was it about it? It's like the invasion of privacy. I think I was just in the garden. It's like, there wasn't anything, but there was something very sort of primal in me that was triggered by it. And I was just trying to explore that. And I thought, but in the past, I haven't really ever bothered too much about that, because I've always been, when I'm out, generally, like, over the years, it's usually within the context of being who I am in the band. Yeah. It's like, I don't really, since I've grown older, I don't really have a social life in the way that you have when you're young, with, like, you just go out. I don't really do that anymore because it's hard work. You know, it's kind of like, it's a lot of the evenings taken up with well-meaning people who it's just, and it's an unnatural, it's not, you know what I mean. It's hard work. So when I'm with the band, we go and do stuff. If we're on tour night and go and do things, and I do actually misplace my identity. I do, because that's often, I think, and sometimes I use it as an excuse to behave in a way that I probably shouldn't. And it's exploring that. And sometimes I think, well, you know, it's sort of like, it's what I do. It's like who I am. It's part of me. So I can't really pretend that it isn't. So it was,
Yeah,
It's
I
kind
get,
it's
it is and it
come
isn't,
to
though.
terms with the fact that, you know, the flaws that are like very obvious to me, you know, that I sometimes wish weren't there, but essentially they're part of who I am. And if I got rid of them all, I wouldn't be me. So
Yeah.
I'd rather just sort of acknowledge them and try to make something of them, get a good song out of them, rather than like go like whip myself on the back.
which, I mean, you know, could be argued that that's almost what writing a song is when you then have to perform it to a certain degree.
Yeah, I think the danger of stepping out of your own shoes into someone else's when you're writing songs is that quite often I've written songs and I thought they're really good songs at the time, and I thought like rather than like not clever, but I thought I've really kind of succeeded in what I set out to do with that song. A good example would be there's a song called Where the Birds Always Sing. And I was really pleased. I thought it's really good. I've actually summed up. It's like the world is neither fair nor unfair, and it was like that was the sort of central premise. And I thought I've you know, and we played it at the few, you know, we played it because we were promoting the album. We did it on that tour. We never played it again, and I realised we never played it again because it didn't have that emotional connection with the audience. It had nothing to do with whether I thought it was a good song or whether it's like I'd achieved what I wanted to. No one would ever name it as their favourite Cure song, and that bothered me for a long time. So I thought that means I can't write about this stuff, because it doesn't work. But I've now realised that it was too dry. There was not enough of me in it. So now when I'm doing something that I'm trying to write, like something like Drone, I'm thinking like, it has to kind of be I have to be in the song. I can't write about it like someone else. It's that, I think. And that's why I think it's a better song. I think it's a better song than my attempts in the past to address similar subjects have failed, because I haven't really been brave enough to acknowledge that it's me in the song.
I know that a record will have those sort of cornerstones as you're putting them together, and I know that you've already stated that Alone and End Song were very much the kind of the tent poles almost for the record.
Yeah, I think that's been true of all the big Cure records that have got opening songs and closing songs. They're always the key, you know. I mean, there are always going to be those two songs.
Yeah.
But when you know, particularly the opening song,
Yeah.
for me, it's like when we wrote Open, actually for the Wish album, I thought, like, here we go, this is going to be a great album, because it informs everything else that follows it, and it's like, and the band feels good, like, you know, it energizes the entire project. Alone, although it's a big, slow song, it had that sort of feeling of grandeur that I wanted to communicate to the others. So when I played the demo of that to everyone, you know, it's like, all right, a couple of them like, it's so slow. Are we going to speed up? I said, no, if anything, we're going to make it slower. You know?
Yeah. And the
then when
vocals start
it's
3
like, I played it
minutes.
to him like, it's an instrumental. You're opening with an instrumental. I said, no, wait.
Yeah, it's perfect though.
Yeah, it's always been a thing on the Wish album. Again, I hadn't written an end song. Like, we didn't have a closing song. Right, we were nearing the end of the project, and I actually wrote the song, whatever it was called, End. It's called, with Boris one night. I just thought we need a big end song, and we just like, stayed up all night and we came up with that, just jamming, which we never normally do. With this one, I had end song was already kind of there because that was the catalyst for wanting to record, because it was like me looking up and looking at the moon and remembering the world and how it was and all that sort of stuff. And I wanted something. I wanted to occupy a whole side of an album, actually, at one point. And I thought, how great would it be to have just like 4 songs, you know, do a double vinyl album and have just one song on each side? That'd be really fun. But then I thought, there's no point in trying to extend these songs to, you know, 2 of them are naturally really long songs, and then I Can Never Say Goodbye is a naturally long song. That could be longer. Some songs, like, there's one called, Same Deep Water as You on Disintegration.
Yeah.
Which is 9 minutes, I think. We played it live. Sometimes it's like 11, 12, 13 minutes. Because it's just a repetitive, and you just get, you know, Simon won't agree with this because Simon hates playing it. That's why we don't play it much. Because he has to play the same bass line for 12 minutes, and it's like, it's really no fun. But for the person who's holding the 6-string bass and just singing whatever comes into the head, it's like one of those perfect songs. You know, you can just like, like for me, you could just play it all night. And I wanted End Song to be that song as well. I just wanted to feel like when it stops, you want to listen to it again. And that was the key to the project for me. So it was weird, because normally, like I say, it's the opening song, but lyrically, Alone was the catalyst for me to write, to think I was able to write again. I did have, when I look back, I probably had a pretty severe case of writer's block for a few years. I first started to write trying to write songs again that meant something around 2016. For about a year I tried, and everything I wrote I hated. So I stopped. I didn't write again until 2019. So I just stopped writing completely. Because I thought I've got nothing left to say. I actually believed that I had nothing left to, it didn't bother me that much, funnily enough. I didn't feel like, oh my God, I've got writer's block. I thought, well, there's not really any such thing as writer's block, 'cause it just means you can't write.
Yeah.
It's like, why force it? So I thought at some point I'll either write something or I won't.
I did want to say about, or ask you a bit about I Can Never Say Goodbye, but I also realised that that's, I don't know, I almost feel a bit weird asking about it, even though.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? It's just that I had a similar moment when I listened to that for the first time. Have you listened to that last St. Vincent record, All Born Screaming?
I have it. I haven't listened to it.
It's a great record, but there's a song on there called Reckless, and the opening lyric, I mean, aside from it being like the most close vocal, and it's fantastic because it's literally like right there. But the lyrics are really heavy, and I said to Annie at the time that was the song that I connected with most straight away from the record. And, the record's great. It's almost like her with this kind of 9 Inch Nails-ish thing that's been brought in, and it's brilliant. That song really resonated with me, and I thought it was because of these certain elements and how it was recorded. But I realized it's the opening lyric, because to me, it's about when I spent the last night with my mum before she passed, because it's so specific in the lyric. And she was like, that's essentially what it is. And I feel like this, it has the similar sort of thing. And it's almost like I feel weird even asking about it, because it's so obviously there, and it says everything. But I just wanted to say that's one of the moments on the record which just feels so powerful.
Something you made me think of something which I haven't thought about really before, which is so I was with my mum when she died, and it was a really almost impossible to explain, although it's happened to billions of people. It's only ever happened to me once, and it really was I had so many weird emotions. I was really pleased that I was there, and really, really unhappy that I was there. Those words don't have enough power to express how you feel. I wrote pages and pages and pages and pages of stuff about that night before I went to bed, running into the next day, about how I felt about everything. And I never turned it into a song. I was never able to even read it, actually. We did a song called Christmas Without You a couple of years after that, which was sort of about my mum dying. And then I kind of changed that, and I think, I can't remember what it's, we've played it a few times since. And I think we're going to go and re-record it. I think that'll probably it will come out maybe on the next album. But I was very aware of not exploiting's the wrong word, but not using this thing that I had just to make a song out of it, because that's sort of what I did. And I thought, I'm not going to do this. I could never really understand why I didn't want to do it. But it just never felt like the thing that I should do. And so when my brother died, I was in the same sort of dilemma. I got home and wrote pages and pages and pages of stuff. But I thought at some point I need to do something, I need to acknowledge this, because it's gnawing away at me. And it took me so long to figure out how and I ended up pretty much back where I was when I started. I thought I'm just going to do a very simple narrative of what happened, my experience of the night, my brother, the last time I saw him. And it's like, then it was like, it's so banal. It's, for a long time. And I wrote all this other stuff, becoming incredibly sort of dramatic and poetic and stuff. And ended back with this, what I consider to be very banal sort of narrative, with a few just added bits of, but it's how I was thinking, like, what can I get away with? And that's the worry. It's like, what can I get away with? What's believable? And I thought, well, I should just write and sing what, I'll know when it's right. And so I sang that song a lot of times at home, but each one ever so slightly different, with different kind of intonation, different words, different emphasis. I even did it from a different perspective of someone who was there, there was actually a bridge bit in it where I was with my brother. So it was, it was a real, just that one song. It was like, for me personally, it was like a very few songs that I've ever written, that song. And I realised afterwards that all I was doing was just dealing with him dying. You know, it was,
Yeah.
you know, like we said right at the start, when things happen to you, you don't necessarily have to think that's the only time this has ever happened. This is the most important thing that's ever, you know, it doesn't really matter. You know, it's how it affects you. And if you want to communicate that to other people, you know, other people, they either like, they'll get it or they don't. And I was very aware of that. I thought, I don't want to write a song that's where I feel like that I'm the victim. He died. I'm alive, you know. And so in a funny way, that informed the record to actually made the tone of the record slightly different, because I thought I want it to be more about how I'm valuing my own life and my own time rather than worrying about, you know, it ending. It doesn't matter what you do or what you want to do. You can't change the fact that you're going to die, but it's like what you do with the time that you've got. So it was, the whole band kind of got behind me because everyone in the band has lost someone close to them. And in fact, one of Simon's older brothers died recently as well. And it became even more poignant when we played it at Troxy. It's like, and yeah, so I thought long and hard about doing it, but in the end, I thought, well, it's, you know, my brother would have loved it. So
Yeah.
that was actually the trick was, you know, because he liked what we did. So I thought, well, what better way